All right, I have started recording. There we go, and I have the nice little transition now. Ooh. All right.
He's learning.
Welcome back, Pike. Welcome back.
Yeah, hi, I'm back. The better half of this podcast is here.
Okay. Well, that's fair. I put all the work in, but you're really the one who brings the content. So,
Yeah,
but anyway,
I
we're
do.
talking about we're talking about a good episode this week. In fact, I was rewatching it. This might actually be my favorite episode of the season. It might beat out Duet. I don't think it's better than Duet,
Oh,
but I like it more.
mm,
Let me look at what else we got
yeah,
this season. We got Battle Lines. I'm trying to yeah, really. I think Duet is the only thing that can compete with it. But I'm
mhm.
pretty sure this is my favorite, just because I like the A and B plot. I really like the Nagus, as is the name of the episode. We get a huge front load of Ferengi culture. Like you have, even with the bad episodes, we were always commenting that Quark was still top tier. So
Mhm.
to have an episode surrounding him, pretty great. Is this the first episode that's surrounding him? Let's see. We have, yeah, I think this might be the first
Uh,
episode that's really just it's a Quark episode.
yeah, this is the first one where he is front and center. His plot is the main plot. He was in Babel. I was like
Oh yeah, he was a pretty
important because
heavy.
he.
Yeah, he was a pretty heavy. He's been a pretty heavy influence overall. It's just a matter of this is the episode where, other than the B plot, it's centered on Quark. Dax
Mhm.
has like I think a scene. Kira I don't think appears at all. O'Brien has a few scenes with the B plot. Uh, Odo has like one or two scenes with Quark, which is very like which given it's a Quark plot, you think it'd be more Odo, but nope. Cisco, he's kind of he's secondary in the B plot, kind of. So
Mhm.
more or less, like this is the first Quark episode, and again, it's probably my favorite episode in the season. And right off the bat, we got something that I'm going to kind of criticize because I think it's a little stupid. Uh, well, actually, no, not this. So the first thing we actually get is we get some mysterious-looking Ferengi coming onto the ship. Another Ferengi who's covered in a cloak, holding a gold scepter with a Ferengi like icon on it, and then a large, what we later learn is like a manservant sort of guy.
Mhm.
Uh, and did you ever watch what was that? Do you remember that show? I think it was on like Nickelodeon in like the early 2000s and 90s. It had the giant gold statue. Do you know what I'm referring
Uh,
to? Secrets of the Hidden Temple.
no. Oh yeah, the game show. The game show, yeah.
Hold on, I want to make
Where the
sure I'm getting
kids
this
have to
right.
go through.
Yeah, I think it's Secrets of the Hidden Temple. I'm trying to find. Okay, so I was actually okay. So the icon for the show is the giant stone faced man, but like with as a gold medallion. The actual stone
Mhm.
faced man is like actually stone colored. So I was gonna say it looked like him. I'm not gonna lie. It looks the Nagus' little icon looks a lot like that. Like and to that end, I'm not gonna lie. It's a Star Trek production. It looks a little cheap considering this is like the icon of like the leader of the Ferengi culture.
Yeah, you got it on discount.
Oh fuck, that's
On
right. No,
yeah,
that's 100% fair. The fact that
yeah.
the Ferengi no, because Ferengi have been known to show off with their wealth. So
Mm.
true. I like the idea that he got it on discount though. Like someone was like, "Hey, I made this cool little icon of your depiction." He's like, "Oh, that's nice. How much you want for it?" It's like, "Well, I spent like a good couple hours." It's like, "I'll give you 30 cents for it."
Hmm.
But so we
Yeah.
just get the scene. It's a mysterious scene. These people coming aboard the ship. We don't know what it's about. And then this is the scene I find silly, and mostly just because of how technology has actually advanced. We see Jake trying to grab all of his like school pads, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
why do you need like 30 of these? He's like struggling to hold them. He's dropping them everywhere, and I'm like, it's almost quaint when you look at the past and how they thought the future would pan out. Where they're like, yeah, you'd have all these
Well,
cool different data pads that do different things.
well, it's just a case of like, oh, you I imagine they're more akin to a book. That's the equivalent, and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
each
that's what I
one's
mean. It's
like,
like each one's its own book, and I'm like, that's a little silly.
well, remember, like even though like, oh, like they do their best to think ahead. It's like they probably didn't think that technology would get to the point where I have the entire Library of Congress at on phone, like equivalent. You know what I mean?
No, I mean I get that. I
Um,
think it's just I almost find it a little quaint because there's other things that they've clearly like people oftentimes cite like the idea of handheld communication devices were like first depicted on Star Trek. I don't think they were first depicted on Star Trek, But it's one of those
Mhm.
things where people oftentimes cite that as like a forward-looking sort of thing. Pretty sure walkie-talkies existed before that, so I don't know how forward-thinking that necessarily is. But the idea that something storing so much as like a single book or maybe a single series of like books needs to be stored on multiple pads. I don't know. It's just it's a little quaint. I think it's a little funny. But we have
Mhm.
this scene, and it's an interesting scene because this is something that's kind of been building up for a while. We've had
Mhm.
we've had like Cisco trying to bond with his son, and his son's relationship with Quark get in the way. So Cisco wants to go to this
Name was
like
Nog.
yeah, I'm sorry with Nog.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Uh, oh god, I'm getting feedback from you, Pike.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so Cisco wants to take his son to the Gratitude Festival on Bajor. His son, like, apparently also wants to see the fire caverns that Cisco's offering to take him to. But Jake is like, oh, yeah, when do we leave? And Cisco's like, this afternoon, right after school for 3 days. And Jake clearly doesn't want to go. Like, he's basically like,
Mhm.
look, I've already planned to hang out with Nog. There's an Andurian freighter coming in for maintenance check tomorrow. And Cisco's like, wait a minute. You want to go hang out in a cargo bay with Nog instead of visit Bajoran fire caves with your old man? And Jake's just like, Nog's my friend.
You're not the friend. You're not the friend.
Well, I do find it a little. I like the scene. It sort of shows, one of my favorite movies is the Goofy movie, and this is the exact same plot,
Mhm.
pretty much, where the father wants to hang out with the son doesn't want to hang out with him, and I'm not gonna lie, I think Cisco's offer is a bit like insane. Hey, right after school today, we're leaving for 3 days. It's like, well, you got to give
Mhm.
me like more time to like prepare for that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
I can make every masterpiece has a cheap imitation joke, but I checked the years DS9 came out first. Just,
Well, I guess
but
like
yeah.
all I'm trying to say, right, is I think this is an interesting depiction of like the father son dynamic, the son growing up, the father wanting to bond with him, and of course Nog getting in the way of that. And we know Cisco's opinion of Nog. He doesn't really have a high opinion of Nog or Ferengi in general. And
Mhm.
I think like the B plot in this is probably the B plot is kind of my like I almost like the B plot a little bit more than the A plot, but it's
Mhm.
also much more simple, much more like condensed. So,
Yeah.
let's see. We'll get more on that plot later, but it's one of those things where it's a very small setup. That scene feels very innocuous. We've seen some scenes like this in prior episodes that are like, it doesn't really go anywhere with Jake and Cisco, where
Mhm.
they're having some sort of argument or something, and it doesn't like evolve, or it just sort of like a background element to establish Cisco as like a father, Jake as the son, establish the relationship, which is fine. But what it ultimately kind of leads to is like sometimes it's awkward, like why was that scene in this episode? And this is, I think, what it's all been paying off to. You see this a
Mhm.
lot in DS9 as opposed to TNG, where DS9 is does these little setups in prior episodes. They'll
Mhm.
introduce a side character a few times before they're relevant in an episode, or in this case, they'll have a few random scenes of father son like conversations to sort of build towards the purpose of this episode, which is to sort of challenge that relationship and what it means. So we
Mhm.
immediately transition to uh, Quark's bar, where Quark admonishes his brother for returning a lady her purse. And I think this is the first time we get the first rule of acquisition, which is once you have their money, you never give it back.
Yep.
And
Yep.
one little detail I do kind of like, is when Quark asks this of Nog, or not Nog, of Rom. Rom responds in almost a sing along way, like
Mhm.
once you get their money, you never give it back. And I'd imagine that's probably how Ferengi teach their kids the first few rules of acquisition is through like song.
Yeah. Mnemonic devices for the
Yeah,
higher numbers, but early on it's like, oh, song and such.
yeah, and it's a matter of like I almost kind of like that because I don't think we get any of the other ones in a form of sing songy way. But
Mhm.
this one they specifically have Nog almost like not Nog, Rom. I keep mixing them
Wrong.
up. They have Rom singing along, which makes me feel that yes, this was something that like Frankie children are taught a song, just like children are taught their ABCs with the song and stuff like that. So
I think it also, looking ahead, it might be a case like, so you know how they later on say like Rom doesn't have the lobes for business, right?
oh yeah, they say it right here.
Um,
Yeah, they say like you
yeah.
small eared cretin or something like that. Yeah,
So Quark never makes use of these like mnemonic devices, and we learn later like, oh, he knew them all by heart, and it's like, oh, he's a successful businessman. He's not the most successful, but he understands the spirit and like what they mean. I think this is like highlighting. I think we never hear like Rom only kind of says them only in a panic or in the sing song way. He never like says them as like a statement of like how he views things actually.
Yeah.
Quark always does. Like he brings them up of like, why are you acting this way? Well, simple. My life philosophy includes this rule of like um
No,
I
yeah, I
don't know.
mean,
It's
like,
just an interesting.
yeah, it's a thing where, like, as you grow up, you would move away from the mnemonic devices. Just like if you were to say, most people, like adults, if you ask them their ABCs, they wouldn't sing the song necessarily, but they would just say them. And, with Rom, you're right, he probably hasn't internalized these as well as, Quark has. And, one thing
Mhm.
that I was rewatching this episode and I kind of thought about it. I'm like, this scene very much presents Quark in the wrong. Not Quark in the wrong, but like they're showing him being kind of cruel to his brother. I
Mhm.
kind of have a little bit of a disagreement with that, with our later understanding of who Quark is as a person. He values the
Mhm.
Ferengi culture like above all. He looks at the rules of acquisition as dogma that you must follow. And when his brother
Yeah.
fails to follow them and he's educating him, you know, that's him trying to make sure that his brother follows the creed that he believes to be like the highest tier of like what it means to be a Ferengi. So,
Yeah.
I think like I don't know. I view it as something that's like it's a nice little detail where you could easily interpret this as Quark just kind of being like an asshole, when in reality he's probably being a lot more like kind to his brother.
Mhm.
Hold on, I'm
Yeah.
trying to fix a little window problem here. It's not a big one. Hold on, but yeah. So we get one thing that's funny is so he punishes his brother by saying, "Okay, you're gonna clean." What does he say? You're gonna clean all the like every rail in the bar that night,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and like the next thing Rom does is he walks over to Nog and he says, for wasting your time studying at that human school, you're gonna clean every rail in the bar tonight. So he just immediately passes off the responsibilities.
Yeah, wouldn't you?
Well,
Like, it's like,
I find it kind of interesting.
listen, Holix, hang on. Remember the rules of acquisition. Exploitation starts at home.
That is true. That is true. Exploitation does start at home, and I think I cannot fix. There we go. I'm fixing this thing. That works. Uh, but anyway, so this is where the Nagus finally arrives in the scene,
Hmm.
and Quark, not recognizing him instantaneously because he has the robe on, offers him
Hmm.
the standard host. Uh, he's telling like a joke to Morn, but then he offers the Nagus like the standard host stuff, and then he realizes who the Nagus is. He kisses the scepter. He bows to him. Uh,
Hmm.
and one thing I like about the scene is the Nagus doesn't say anything. So he doesn't speak at all. His son is speaking for him, and
Hmm.
I'm trying to remember. Hold on. What is the who's the actor who plays the Nagus? Yeah, it's it
Nagus
was
actor.
pretty.
Hang on.
I think it's Wallace Shawn. Hold on. Da, da, da. Give me just a minute. I have Memory
I
Alpha up.
know
I have Memory Alpha pulled up.
Wallace Shawn. Wallace
Yeah, it
Shawn,
is
yeah,
Wallace
played
Shawn.
by Wall.
So one little detail that I learned is that Wallace Shawn is allergic to latex,
Hmm.
which means he's allergic to the
Yeah.
mask he's wearing.
Yeah. It sucks for him.
And you could notice this in a lot of his episodes, especially like as Zek becomes a little bit more of like a secondary character in the series.
Hmm.
Is you see like around his eyes where the mask doesn't entirely fit. Sometimes you could see it getting redder and poofier. That's because he's having
Hmm.
an allergic reaction as he's acting, which dedication to the craft. I don't think any actor should need to hurt themselves for that, but clearly he was putting the
Hmm.
effort in there to make it work. Pretty sure they wouldn't have like alternatives to the mask or something like that, or maybe they made it before they realized he was allergic to it, and they're like, "Well, we don't have the money to remake it," something like that.
Hmm.
But it looks good. It sucks that he was probably in a lot of pain when doing these scenes. He didn't let it affect his acting though, which is again just props to him. But
Hmm.
so we have a bit of a funny scene where Quark offers, or the Nagus' son, who's like his voice for him right now, is Krax is his name. He asks that, oh yes, the Nagus has heard of your holosuites and wishes to partake. And Quark's just like, are you sure he's up for it? Like, the idea of we know what the holosuites are for, we know what actions take place in there, and clearly the Nagus wants to take place, but the Nagus is clearly very old, so Quark is kind of worried. He's like, is he gonna be okay? And
Yeah.
Krax is just like, are you like challenging my father's like rule? And Quark's like, no, 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 of course not, of course not. Here, I offer many different services, and the Krax is just like, my father hates choosing. He's like, then let me give you my top five. Which of these would you like? And Krax is like, father's decided all five.
God.
And Quark
Yeah.
is just like, oh, okay, sure, all five it is then. So, it's a
Yep.
funny scene, and we get a funny follow up to it afterwards in a slightly different scene where the Nagus walks out and he drinks a huge thing of like orange juice, and he's like, that was fun. And Quark's just like, he's been in there for hours. So,
Yeah.
says something, I guess, a little bit about a Ferengi virility, but, we know what the holosuites would be used for, and this is clearly an example of it. But now we get more of the B plot.
Y the B plot.
Yeah.
The B plot.
So I guess Keiko's actor might still not be back because they have O'Brien still as the substitute teacher. Which, again, O'Brien just doing everything on the station.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's the
like
most important person to the Federation and to all of galactic history. Don't you know?
true, true. And he's asking the kids to turn in their essays on ethics, which he asked them to write. And
Hmm.
I think like from what I remember, like a lot of these kids are supposed to be different ages. So it's weird that you would give the
Yeah.
same assignment to all of them. But again, I guess
Yeah.
it's weird that I guess
Well, to be fair, it's sort of like remember that this is supposed to be like the Western story where it's like, oh, it's
of course,
living in the frontier town. So it's like,
yeah.
oh yeah, every kid in the town does, regardless of age, goes to the same schoolhouse. It's like,
Yeah, but I
yeah,
guess like it's interesting you give them all the same assignment because some of these kids, we know Nog is 14, Nog and Jake are 14, or about the same age. I think Nog might be 15, but some of these kids in here they look a little bit younger. So it's interesting that I guess like you could have different standards for what you'd want from them, like how many pages you'd want. But I
hmm,
believe, let me double check. I believe he's like O'Brien says they were all like 2-page essays. Uh,
yeah,
yeah. Uh, No, I don't think he specifies the number. So in theory, I guess he could have had different standards for each student. Like, all right, the younger students only need like a page. The older students need like a proper essay sort of deal. Which fine, I think it's a little bit odd. But Nog doesn't have it. He claims that his pad was stolen. O'Brien seems a bit skeptical, and he says, "Yeah, it was stolen by some Vulcans." And
mm.
O'Brien has like a scene of like, really, Vulcans took
Vulcans.
now, I'm not a racist, but Vulcans are entirely ethical. They would never steal. I don't like to prejudge people unless it's in a positive way, says O'Brien. Except we do know he prejudges people, especially if they're Cardassians. But it's just
Yeah.
it's one of those things. It's funny in the setting where the entire like species of Vulcans is characterized as being noble people, and I'm like, I mean, if anyone, I guess the Vulcans are probably the best ones to say that about. But it still feels
Yeah, like
like
they're the ones like
the classic
it,
sci-fi like trope of every member of a species is more or less within like the same standard deviation of a behavior. There's no
yeah.
drastic like different cultural aspects within an alien species because you can't really show that. Except DS9 does show that a little bit with Cardassians and Ferengi, but with stuff like Vulcans and stuff they haven't really explored a lot. It's nope. Here's the racial
Well,
trait that your entire species has.
two things. So one, the thing is, we know Romulans are basically the other cultural like thing uh, for Vulcans because like oh it's revealed that basically the reason why they split was a disagreement over like passion and logic, right?
Yeah,
And two, we do actually see one I was gonna ask like do we ever see a villainous Vulcan in the series? Like oh yeah, later on the racist, the literal fucking racist, like
yes,
who,
that is true. But I guess like again, like DS9 is the thing that explores that, right? And
yeah.
like most, I mean, I think like Romulans, if I recall from the original series, Romulans, or I think it was one of the movies. Romulans are basically like a different species now. Like
Mm,
sufficiently like they are different enough from Vulcans that they're not actually the same anymore. Like they they basically imply that like your separation through like thousands and thousands of years says like you're now both like subspecies of each other. So they're not
yeah,
actually the same as Vulcans.
they can still interbreed. I'm pretty
Well, yeah,
sure,
but
but
humans can
yeah.
interbreed with Vulcans, I believe. So
Well, yeah, but who would? Listen, what Vulcan would? Anyways, I'm gonna stop.
anyway,
That
anyway, uh, but yeah, so it's funny because Nog accuses the Vulcans of theft, and O'Brien doesn't really believe it. Nog ropes Jake in, saying, "Yeah, Jake saw it," and O'Brien like looks at Jake like, "Did you?" Jake seems really uncomfortable with it. They have a really awkward scene where like Nog like turns around and clearly whispers, like, "Come on, man, just side with me on this." Where O'Brien like should have seen this and been like, "Okay, so you clearly are conspiring here." But
yeah.
you know, after
Here's the
Jake,
thing. Jake's the
he stage
station.
whispers. Yeah. Well, like
Yeah,
here's the like Nog stage whispers. It's like, look, I'm whispering, but no one else he sees it, and
yeah,
it's funny, but O'Brien basically can't contradict him. He's like, all right, well, you know what, just turn it in tomorrow. Like, part of me wants to think that he doesn't actually believe them, and he's just like, look, regardless, if you don't have it, just turn it in tomorrow, sort of deal. At the same time,
yeah.
like he can't actually like it's 2v1, right? He can't just accuse Nog of lying. I don't know if Nog necessarily has a history of lying in the classroom, which he probably doesn't. If O'Brien's willing to believe him, but also
Well,
like
there's also the fact Jake, who is the son of the station commander, is like, and he doesn't like. O'Brien's
sure,
just a
sure.
substitute. He doesn't want to deal with that situation.
Yeah, I mean, again, I
Uh,
think it's a situation where I don't know if O'Brien really believes them, but at the same time, he doesn't really want to start this as a fight, and he's just like, "Look, just turn in tomorrow. It's not that big a deal."
yeah,
So we
no
get.
problem.
Uh, I mean,
Uh,
we can probably jump ahead because I do want to talk about the scene that sort of immediately follows this and part of the B plot, where later on we
yeah,
see O'Brien talking with Cisco on the turbo lift. Cisco asks like, "Hey, how's it going in class?" O'Brien's like, "Yeah, I can't wait for Keiko to get back. In part because I'm tired of being the sub." He makes jokes that like the students try and like get under the substitute skin. He tried to do it when he was a student, and you know then O'Brien brings up that he's kind of concerned about Jake and like Nog's friendship, and
yeah.
Cisco brings up the same concern. Uh, you know, O'Brien's basically like, then why don't you say something about it? And Cisco's like, look, because I'm afraid if I get between them, my son will choose Nog over me.
Hmm.
I do like that O'Brien's like, no, I don't think he would. It's like and then Cisco's like, that's because your daughter's 3. Wait till she's 14. Like,
Yeah.
wait until she's in that teenage years of rebelling against her parents. And I don't know, like again, this is another scene where, you know, until we were doing this rewatch, I didn't really realize how close O'Brien and like Cisco tend to be. They tend to be like interesting confidants that you don't really expect, but it entirely makes sense given both their backgrounds and the fact that they're both fathers.
Well, there's also the fact of like O'Brien's the closest thing to like an E9 or E8 that we have in the series of you know how there are times where officers in the military will like look to the highest ranked enlisted like, okay, you on the ground, what do you think here?
Yeah,
Like yeah, that's what O'Brien is. He's the guy who's risen through the ranks in the field and basically like able to give that insight. He's like the closest thing to a warrant officer or which is a whole other warrant officers are weird, but basically he's the senior enlisted slash warrant officer, and he's the one that can be trusted to give advice on things. That's probably
yeah.
why he ended up with this role as a substitute. Of like besides the fact of like, oh, he's married to Keiko, it's like you're married to Keiko, plus you are generally like very smart and on the ground. So yeah, we trust you. Plus dad. So
No, I
yeah,
mean like I agree. I think it's I think it's I like the relationship, and I mean O'Brien's basically treated as one of the commanding officers. I don't
yeah,
really think that anyone looks at him as, well, you're only an enlisted. You know, maybe Bashir does it. I don't know, but at this point in time, like people like Cisco clearly treats O'Brien as having like an equal say in a lot of these things,
hmm,
and I mean, again, I just think they have a lot in common. Both of them sort of have this engineering background, and both of them are fathers. So there's a clear sort of relationship these two can sort of build together. And I think it's a much more subtle one than you see. Like, it's never really given too much focus the dynamic between these two. Whereas like the dynamic between like Cisco and Kira or Cisco and Dax is a lot more stressed in certain episodes. Whereas
Hmm.
this one's a lot more of a it again, one of the things that's so great about DS9 is that all the characters have some sort of like character dynamic with every other character. You know, if you by the end of the series, if you asked me, hey, how does Nog interact with Kira? I would know exactly how to explain how they interact with one another because I understand their characters so thoroughly and their relationship is well established. Meanwhile,
Hmm.
honestly, like with something like TNG, there's going to be times where you ask me, like, how does Geordi interact with Deanna Troy? And I'm like, well, I mean, they're friendly, they're peers, but I don't feel like I've ever been given any sort of relationship dynamic between them outside of that.
Oh, the relationship dynamic is always perfect human.
Well, sure.
Perfect human.
Like, I mean, I don't want to throw too much shade at TNG, but it's just, I feel like every character here is like, when they were writing this, they had this clear like web of how do characters interact with one another. How does Jake interact with Kira? How does Kira interact with Odo? How does Odo interact with Quark? How does Quark interact with Cisco? And they had very clear understandings of who these characters and how they would act amongst each other. And they always wanted to give some of these interactions focus, even if it's not the main focus, right? Like again, like you have Cisco and his son Jake. Like it's a very small thing that's been sort of a small thread going through a lot of these episodes. Cisco and O'Brien, another sort of small background character like interaction that's not really given too much focus until now. You know, these things are well done, and I don't think TNG ever really did it that much. You know, obviously DS9 has the benefit of learning from TNG's mistakes, so I'm not gonna like, you know, I'm not gonna like lower TNG's like my view of it, but it just elevates DS9 for me because it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
I know these characters feel real because they interact with one another. It's not like, well, we don't have any scenes where Odo's interacting with Jake, so these characters don't know each other. It's like, no, no, no. We give them scenes. We give them scenes where they interact with each other, and it's logical, it makes sense, and it builds the relationship. I mean, the last
Hmm.
episode, Move Along Home, it's not great, but one of the things we complimented was how like Odo interacts with Jake. You know, he reassures him, like because Jake's worried about his father, and then he dismisses him and tells him to go to school because he kind of knows that would take Jake's mind off the situation. It would make things seem normal for him, so that he wouldn't
Hmm.
worry. Like, so now going forward, we know how Odo would interact with Jake, and we see that going forward. There's a few other times I can recall where Odo interacts with Jake, and it's along the same lines where Odo is very kind and caring towards one of the youngest members of the the characters, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's just very well done. And so after the school scene, prior to the scene we were just talking about, we get to the scene I sort of brought up before, where we hear the Nagus in one of the hollow suites, and some suggestive laughing is coming from there. But we do have Quark having a conversation with Rom, where Rom is like, "Oh, isn't it great? The Grand Nagus is under our roof. He clearly respects you, Quark. This is a good thing." And Quark is like, "No, this is horrible." Rom's not sure why, and Quark has to remind him that like the Grand Nagus gets whatever he wants. He's gonna want to buy this bar. Like it's basically the
Yeah.
nexus point for Ferengi into the Gamma Quadrant. Getting that feedback from you again,
Ah, I
but
hate. I hate.
but
Go ahead.
anyway, it's just so Quark is very much worried that his bar is basically going to be purchased and he won't be allowed to say no. So we don't really know too much about that dynamic because clearly, like he says, the Nagus will buy his bar for less than half of what it's worth. It's like, okay, why would you have to sell it to him? It's like, well, because he would basically pressure Quark to do so. And I imagine there's probably some like social like requirement that if the Nagus buys something from you, you don't screw him out of the deal,
Perhaps.
which is
Perhaps.
what you would do with any other Ferengi.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're screwing each other, but it's like if you screw the Nagus, it's just like everyone's gonna know,
Well, yeah, but
and
like
it's
even
getting
here's the thing.
good with the.
Yeah, if you set a price that the Nagus is not willing to pay and he has to walk away from the deal, imagine how he's going to view you going forward, sort of deal, where it's like
Hmm.
he'll never want to deal with me again because he knows I tried to screw him over once. Uh,
Yep.
so it's sort of like, yeah, you can't treat the Nagus that way because the Nagus is like the arbiter of so many elements of Ferengi culture. He's like the one person they're not allowed to try and swindle.
Yep.
And that's what he's worried about. And then, of course, we have that scene where the Nagus comes out, drinks all his orange juice, compliments the holodeck programs, this is the first time the Nagus speaks, and I think it's very interesting because again, we had the first scene where he doesn't speak at all, and now we have this scene where he does speak. You'd almost expect him to have like a more foreboding voice, but he does have a very high pitched and like nasally voice.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. It's a little bit of humor where it's like, yeah, he's not really just like grandiose person. He's kind of the same as every other Ferengi, kind of a little swindler.
A
And
little swindler.
yeah, and uh, there's a funny scene where it's like, oh, now Crack's like the Nagus requires rest, and then Quark's like, then allow me to offer my own brother's room for you to rest in. Just the way the line is delivered is absolutely hilarious, and Rom can't really say or do anything. It's like, okay, never mind. I can't argue this.
Yeah,
But
you're gonna lose this one, buddy. You're
yeah,
gonna lose.
it's pretty. It's fairly funny. Then we get to the next scene. The alien that's like, I forget what I'm trying to remember what the alien's name was. Barbo. No, that's not it. The giant attendant alien to the Nagus.
Hmm.
He's basically testing out the grubs. We don't actually know what he's testing, but Zek is asking him like, "Oh, are you sure?" The attendant nods, and then Zek starts to like eat into the worms. He's like, "Ah, yes, these tube grubs are chilled to perfection." So I don't know if he was like testing like the food if it tasted good, or if he was testing it for poison.
Poison. That's what Mehardun is there for. He's the attendant plus the food taster to basically like make sure it's okay.
Yeah, but I guess like
Um,
the thing I want to almost be concerned about is in this scene, Quark is looking at like the attendant as if he's like waiting for approval. Like, okay, if you approve it, then it's given to Zek, which is like Quark would know if he poisoned the food or not, so he shouldn't be like antsy about this. It almost
yeah,
feels
but
like it's
he's worried of like a false accusation.
true,
That's
true, but I like to think it's a mix between like not only is he testing it for poison, he's also testing it if it's like good enough to eat.
hmm hmm
I don't know, because again, I think it's meant to be a little bit subversive, where it looks like he's testing for poison, but then like Zek immediately like tucks in after the approval and just like, ah, yes, my compliments. These are children. I don't know the way it's when I watched it, it was almost supposed to be a little bit subversive there, where it's like we think he's
mm,
testing for poison, but he's really just testing for like the flavor of it. Like Zek is that picky; he has other people test his food, but at the same time, like it's probably both. And one other thing I liked about the
yeah.
scene, I think we've seen it before. This might be the first time. They have the giant lazy Susan in the center of the like table where they can like spin it around and grab different plates and sort of like pull
Hmm.
stuff onto their plate, which
Yeah.
this looks exactly like a Dabo wheel.
Yeah, they probably reused it, let's
Well,
be
I mean,
honest.
I was going to compliment it and be like, look, it almost feels like an element of their culture where they have this one element, and not only is this element present in their games, it's also in how they serve food and like do stuff like that. I don't know. I thought it was maybe
Hmm.
consistent. One Ferengi made the Lazy Susan, and he sold so many of them that it's just used everywhere. It's used in their
No,
board
no, no.
games. It's
See,
used in their dining tables.
they just love wheels because it was the first invention you could monetize for them. Like how
Oh, that would be such great
Peter,
lore.
like Caveman Peter and Family Guy, Peter will make you go.
Yeah, I mean, true. Like, again, it could have just been one of those things where someone's like, guys, I could sell this. It's like, it's just a wheel. It's like, yeah, but I can sell it.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit, like, again, I think it's a small detail. Could it have just been because it's like, yeah, guys, we don't have the resources for this? But then again, they could have just had all the plates on the table, right?
Hmm.
So they specifically were like, no, no, no. The Ferengi serve their food via Lazy Susan. We see this multiple times, and like they also use that for Dabo. So I think that's like a nice little clever thing that like unifies. It's like, yeah, they have similar items throughout their culture. That's just how it works. So, okay,
Yeah.
and I do have one scene that I would, actually we're not there yet. So Zek the Nagus is complimenting Quark on his business acumen in opening the bar so close to the wormhole. Uh, Krax is just like, but he didn't even know the wormhole existed, and Zek is just like, that's what makes it so impressive. He had the instinct, the ears to make the smart move before anyone else did.
Hello.
I like the idea that I'm not gonna lie, this kind of portrays the Nagus as a little bit like demented or senile, where he very clearly is like, ah, yes, Quark, the brilliant businessman, saw into the future and understood exactly where to open his bar. It's like I don't think that, like, that's clearly not what happened. Like Quark
Yeah.
Quark got lucky, but maybe that's another Ferengi culture thing. They don't really believe in business luck. They believe in instinct, right? It's like I'm gonna attribute my success to my success to my instincts rather than random
Well, yeah,
chance.
like they're basically hyper capitalists, right? So, like Hulk, you and I, outside of the culture, like yeah, like capitalism is both instinct, ability, but also there is some luck of being the right time, right place, kind of by chance,
Well,
right?
that's just life,
So
but yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we know that, but a lot of like the most hyper capitalist people, like laissez-faire, like no, I earned all of this by like my own wits and such. It's like, well, yeah, but you also had some like luck.
You
Like
invested in
there's all
Bitcoin when no one thought it was worth anything, and then it skyrocketed, and that's not intelligence. That's just random chance.
yeah, it's very much just like there's always this like element of like random luck, and it's like but as a hyper capitalist, the Nagus is just like, no, he had the lobes.
Well,
It's
that's
like,
that's just the
yeah.
nature of life, where in life people will attribute their success to their own merit, and they'll attribute their failure to bad luck. There's like a human instinct to do that,
Uh-huh.
and it's just that's just life. But I do find it funny here. Um, that being said, this also could basically there's three ways to interpret this. One is it's an element of their culture. Two,
Hmm.
the Nagus is actually kind of senile. Or three,
Hmm.
the Nagus is actually trying to butter Quark up because he actually has the greater plot of this episode is the Nagus is basically going to use Quark in one of his schemes. So
Hmm.
trying to make sure that Quark views him as only kind and only nice and only helpful to him is kind of necessary for his plan. God, we're getting that
Yeah.
feedback from you, Pike.
God damn it, I don't know, man. Like this is the same
Push to
setup as
talk.
always.
Put push to talk.
Oh no, no, push. You won't hear my screams then.
True.
Uh,
Well, you can just push it, and then scream. Hold
yeah,
on, guys.
but
Let me
then I
push the
had
button to scream.
like
True. It's not as improvised and passionate there. So I
yeah.
will agree. I will agree. Okay, you can leave it off push to talk, but every time it ruins the recording, I'm going to cry a little bit inside.
You
Um,
always cry.
we then
So
get a scene. That's not true.
look who's
Anyway,
crying.
we then get a scene where I think this is a little bit dumb, but Nog basically, who's serving food, he basically looks over to his dad and says, "Can I go now? I have homework." And this spurs on an
Mhm.
argument where Zek is like, "What do you mean? What's homework? Like, why does he have homework?" And let's see. Oh yeah, Krax points out that there's a Federation school here run by a human, a female, uh, and Zek is just like, "And you allow your son to attend this place?" Like the way he asks is actually hilarious. It's actually very much the
Yeah,
realm of
it
like almost like aghast. Like, how could you allow your son to be taught by a female? And then Rom
yeah.
immediately caves and he's like, I never want you to step foot in there again. Go to your room and no studying. And I find that funny because Nog actually seems really off put that he's not allowed to study. Oh, and I forgot to point out, Nog, because they only have 4 chairs apparently, Nog is sitting on the floor.
Yep.
He just told to sit on the floor. It's like, exploitation starts at home. I feel like it's
Exploitation starts at home.
but I guess the thing I find a little bit weird about the scene is I'd imagine that Nog would have been told, look, you have to be incredibly polite to the Nagus. He can ruin your life if you disrespect him or make him angry. And the way
Yeah.
Nog acts is unironically very disrespectful. He's like, he's serving
Yeah.
he's serving this guy. He's like, can I leave? Like, he's acting like being a
Mm.
teenager. And I'm not saying it's out of character, but it feels like this is something that would have clearly been told to Nog. It's like, look, man, this is the equivalent of if the president came to your house for dinner, right? This is your
The Haley
president.
Smith situation.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of okay, the president's come to your house for dinner. It's like you're gonna act very like your parents are basically gonna grill you. It's like you need to act polite. If you don't, we're sending you to your aunt and uncle's for the night because we can't risk you pissing off the president in our house. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a little bit weird. It kind of gets some drama going for the B plot. It's not too bad. It's there's some funny comedy and some good character there, but
Hmm.
let's see. Um, oh yeah, like Zek comments, it's very distressing that the Federation do-gooders are always sticking their noses in other people's business. And Zek says, speaking of business, Quark, I've come to ask a favor of you. I need your bar. And Quark's like, oh no, I knew it. And Zek's like, I need your services as host for a meeting I'm gonna hold in your bar at tomorrow. And Quark is like, oh, I
Hmm.
consider it a privilege. Yay! Like I'm not getting my bar bought out. We have a different
What?
situation going on. And yeah. So like that is that scene. Let's see. We have a small scene, I believe, in the ops center. Oh yeah, no, Kira is here briefly, but she doesn't have any lines. So, oh yeah, this is just
Yeah,
this
I
apparently she
actually
is
know why. I know why
why.
that's the case. Because speaking roles pay more. I was like,
Oh yeah,
Beer, when he was writing this episode, was like, oh, who can I let speak? Not you, not you, you, yes.
yeah, because like Odo gets
Uh,
two. Like Odo gets a few lines. He gets two here, where they have a bunch of Ferengi coming here, and Cisco's like, "Look, about all the Ferengi visitors we're getting," and Odo's like, "I'm already on it." Which good
mm-hmm.
old fashioned space racism.
Racism, here we go.
It's basically just like, "Yep, Ferengis are here, so we got to make sure we keep double like track of like what they're doing here."
Mm.
And that's it for that scene. It's a very small scene. I guess just to establish that yes, something is going on here. I think we get Odo in a later scene, but nothing right now. So we get to the scene. This is the Ferengi business meeting scene, and Zek basically tells them all to be seated. Let's see here. I mean, it's just a lot of running around where Quark and Rom are basically trying to fix everything up. Krax is basically like criticizing him. Is like, look, no, you can't have these two sit next to each other. It's clearly bad business, you know. So it's really just setting up for the meeting. And while
Yep.
that's going on, we get the B plot again, where
B
Jake
plot.
wants Jake and Nog are sort of sitting over, looking over the promenade as their favorite spot. Nog tells him, "He's like, I'm through with school." Jake's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, the classes are boring. I don't like going to them." And Jake kind of immediately picks up, "Is this your father's idea?" Nog's like, "Look, it's the right decision. I need to be a good Ferengi." It's like, but Jake is like, "But don't you want to learn things like, oh, things like ethics, things that are going to hold me back? School is a waste of time for me. I'm a Ferengi. There's no profit in it." And like he's yelling at Jake at this point, and Jake's like, "Look, why are you yelling at me?" It's like, "Cause you're a stupid human. I don't know why I bother with you." Uh, and then Jake's like, "I'm stupid. You're the one not going to school."
I mean, he right. He
He's
do be
right,
right though.
but so I mean, I'm gonna skip a little bit ahead because I do like what happens here. So we see that like Jake is kind of like, he's kind of brooding in his and Cisco's quarters. And Cisco's like, "Hey, what's wrong? Like, is your oatmeal lumpy?" He's like, "Nah, it's fine." Like, like Nog's father pulled him out of school. Cisco's like, "Look, I see why he did that." He makes a point that the Federation has never really been able to get along with the Ferengi because they don't really have any sort of cultural basis to work together.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
Cisco's like, "Yeah, but you always taught us that we're supposed to respect other cultures and work with them." He's like, "Sometimes it's just not possible." And like Jake is basically just like, let's see, so Nog goes his way and I go mine, and Cisco's like, "These things happen. How about we play a little baseball after school?" And Jake's like, "No, I have something I need to do," and he leaves. I
Hmm.
really like these two scenes because Jake clearly recognizes that what Nog is saying is not what he means. There's there's the text of the scene and the subtext. If you just read it out loud, it sounds like Nog is being like, both racist and mean to Jake. But Jake immediately realizes these aren't your words. Like I know you, and
Hmm.
he knows that Nog doesn't want to leave school. Remember, we saw that previous scene where Nog is told he's not allowed to study in his room, and he gets mad about that. Nog likes
Yeah.
school, even if he's not good at it or if he's busy doing other stuff. And he likes that he gets to learn
Yeah.
and hang out with his friend Jake, but he's being told he's not allowed to do that. And Jake sees
Hmm.
that, and he immediately like goes on the offensive. He's like, "You know what? No, I can't spend time with you, Dad. I have something I have to do." And that'll progress going forward. But we do get the scene with what this meeting is going over. So Zek has a pretty long speech. He talks about how, oh yeah, many of you have like these are like I guess these are some of the highest ranking businessmen in the Ferengi Empire.
Yeah, the
You
ones
know,
with the biggest, basically
biggest
corporate
businesses are
empire.
yeah the biggest
Yeah.
profits within the Alpha Quadrant. And he's like, "Look, we have a huge possibility here. Nobody in the Gamma Quadrant knows of Ferengi, so the possibility for expansion is staggering." And they make a point that like our reputation would be absolutely stainless. Our word can be our bond until we decide to break it.
Yeah, it's like,
Which
well,
I mean,
why
that's
do
funny.
people hate us? I don't know.
I mean,
Could it
look,
be
that's
because you lie?
like, I guess I'm a little annoyed at that because, I mean, we know that the Ferengi are very shrewd business people. They will screw you over, and they're very very much aware of that. But I feel that they would
Yeah.
have almost this dilute like. So we learned a lot about this about the Klingons, right? We know that not Klingon, yeah, the Klingon culture is all about honor, but we know for a fact that
Hmm.
some of the highest ranking members aren't exactly honorable,
Oh
and
yeah, absolutely.
they basically have to delude themselves because they're like, look, I have to act dishonorable to maintain my position and get power, but in my culture, we believe that honor is the be all end all. That you have to act honorable. If you have dishonor, you need to repent of some in some form. Yet they
Hmm.
act dishonorable. So what it kind of comes across as is like, oh, they have to delude themselves into believing that even though what they're doing is dishonorable, it's not actually dishonorable or it's worth the dishonor, right? That's one of the things you
Yeah.
kind of get with the Klingon culture. With the Ferengis, they seem very much aware that they're just a bunch of lying, skeeving, like scumbags. I kind of wish there was maybe
Hmm.
a little bit more of a delusion that they believed that it's like yeah, it's a survival of the fittest or something like that. Where if you're not capable of deceiving your opponent, then that's their fault, sort of deal. I wish it was a little bit less. They were so blatantly aware of how scummy they were,
Hmm.
and more they had some sort of delusion that what they were doing is almost like some sort of moral rightness. Like I said before
Yeah.
with Quark, where he's kind of being like cruel to Rom, but he's being cruel to Rom in the sense of he views Rom as failing to live up to Ferengi standards, and he views Ferengi standards as like a moral good. So he
Hmm.
sort of is trying to reform his brother. That seems to be what Quark is going for. When you have this
Hmm.
kind of scene where they say, yeah, our word will be our bond until we decide to break it, it's like, well, do you not have like some sort of issue with
Yeah.
that? Do you not have some sort of sense? I mean, we know that they don't really have a sense of honor. We get some interactions between Klingons and Ferengi later on, and how they view on like pretty much Ferengi don't have put any stake in honor, but
Right.
it's very much in the realm of like I wish they had almost this like veil of how do we present ourselves versus how we act, and there doesn't seem to be that veil. They seem to be like, no, we're total. We know we're scumbags, and we're gonna act like it. It's all for profit. It's worth it.
Yeah.
I wish there was some sort of like oh yeah, you're allowed to break your word as long as it leads to profit. If you break your word and it doesn't lead to profit, that's just bad business. If they had some sort of
Yeah.
element like that, but we don't really get too much of that. And so they're asking who will lead us in this endeavor into the Gamma Quadrant. Crack says no one else but my father, and Zek is like, I thank you for your confidence, but I decline. I'm old. The fire dims. I'm just not as greedy as I used to be. I'm feeling almost generous.
I gave
Oh,
I gave a discount.
dear
Oh.
God, that's like one of the cardinal sins.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ever been mentioned, but we know that the Ferengi rules of acquisition. I wonder if they do have like a form of like the Ferengi Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not give discount. Thou
Yeah.
shalt
Well, that
not.
wouldn't be there
Yeah.
because we did skip a scene where the Nagus is like trying to get Cisco and Kira on board with this, and remember like how he's like what he has to do, give that shipment of like some sort of fertilizer to them basically for free when he was originally going to charge them like give them just a discount
Was that
or
in
at
this episode?
cost. Yeah, that they were trying to organize a. That's one of the first things. There was a I'm pretty sure that, yeah. Let's see. I am stupid. I misremembered.
Oh no, so we do
I
have
misremembered.
one line. We do have some lines from Kira from before. I do recall. Uh, let's see. As the third, yeah. So they're not actually aware of what the meeting's about. They think it's like Quark's birthday or something. Uh,
Hmm.
Kira does make a joke. My advice is to lock up the silverware. Again, some of that classic space racism. Um,
Yeah. Well, that coming from Kira, that makes sense given how she also feels about Cardis. Like
well,
this.
we also know she doesn't like Quark. So,
Yeah, that's also true.
but yeah. So the Nagus is basically like, look, I'm just not as greedy as I used to be. Krax is like, yes, you are more so. Zek's like, look, I've made up my mind. We need a new Grand Nagus, someone to push the Ferengi adventures in the Gamma Quadrant. And he is, and there's like a pause, it's Quark. And everyone is
Ah.
just angry about this. The people yell, he's a
Yeah.
lobeless amateur. Father, have you lost your mind? I won't stand for this. And they all storm out. And then Zek, Quark is basically like quietly sitting in the corner. He was told not to leave, but he wasn't like sitting at the table with everyone else.
Hmm.
So then Zek sort of like looks over him. It's a very sort of dramatic scene. I have it pulled up now. And He's like looking at him like from a distance. He's like, "Congratulations! I know you'll do a wonderful job." And we kind of get like we see Quark smile, but he doesn't actually say anything in this scene.
Hmm.
So I think it's meant to be like it's a little interpreted that Quark doesn't really know how to interpret this information just yet. Obviously, it's a big deal to be named Grand Nagus, but like that's
Yeah.
also a lot
Well,
of
he was not
responsibility.
prepped for it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's
Yeah,
also just a lot of responsibility, and he sees that a lot of powerful Ferengi are not happy with this.
yeah, you're gonna
So
die.
yeah, we get that scene with Jake and Cisco we mentioned before, and then we get a scene where they're walking on the promenade. Quark now has the little staff, and a bunch of these like Ferengi are basically walking next to him, saying like, "Grand Nagus Quark, we haven't been formally introduced. I'm Grawl, your new best friend." And he's like, "Oh, what do you wish to do?" He's like, "I wish to protect you." Quark's like, "Protect me?" It's like from those who would want to, who are jealous of your position and wish to take your place. It can be very dangerous. How do I stop them? And Grawl's like, "Leave it to me. I'm not going to allow anyone harm such a grateful friend such as yourself." How grateful am I? And Grawl's like, "Grateful enough to make sure I have my pick of the most lucrative Gamma Quadrant opportunities." Quark's like, "And if I refuse?" Grawl's like, "You won't."
Yeah,
So
you know what's
it's a little
actually
bit of a
funny?
it's a little bit of a threat, but yeah, what's
Uh,
funny?
so Grohl was the one asking about the delay, and he's also the one who uh initially introduced the idea of like it'll be absolutely stainless. And before this, he was the one who also said like, oh, the Grand Nagus should lead once Crack says it. So this is just Grohl in general, and he actually was the one who said loveless amateur. Like
Yeah, he was he
he
was he was one of the ones I believe. What was it? Quark actually mentions that later in the episode, but yeah, he basically is like, "Yeah, you didn't stand for me when this started." Uh,
uh
it's
da,
one of
da,
the people he
da.
says that to, but with Grawl, yeah, Grawl is basically just like this person. Grawl's clearly an opportunist. I do kind of find it interesting though. You know, you have a character who originally he gets angry and he storms out, and then immediately he's like, "Okay, but now I gotta like make some headway with this new Grand Nagus."
Mhm.
So, uh, you know, Quark then goes into Rom's quarters where Zek is currently staying. He's like, "Look, I'm in desperate trouble." Uh, Zek is like, "So am I, and please call me Zek." Now, which should I choose, Risa or Balosny Six? Quark's like, What should I? What do you mean?" It's like, he's like, "Look, for my vacation, uh, the first I've had in 85 years." Uh,
Jesus
Bal-
Christ.
Bal- uh, Balosny apparently has soothing harmonies of the tide can cause the most stimulating hallucinations, and he says that in a very provocative way. Uh,
Oh boy.
but he doesn't want to say no to those voluptuous rising females. Now, anyone who's watched TNG, you know that Risa is a pleasure planet.
Yep.
So, gosh, I mean, the fact that there's entire planets that are like, yeah, we all know what this planet's for. It's the orgy world,
It's the orgy planet.
and people are just
They
okay with it.
they both.
No one thinks it's weird.
Except for Worf, eventually.
Well, Worf just doesn't really
But that's
like it
a
because his culture doesn't really like view that as like to them the most pleasurable thing would be battle.
yeah, true.
Relaxation is a uh weak man's recreation. But
Yeah.
so Quark asks like, "Look, you know, Grawl just threatened my life," and Zek is like, "Oh, so he's the first, huh? Well, he won't be the last." Uh, Quark's like, "What am I
Yeah.
supposed to do? You pick me as a successor, give me some advice." Zek's like, "Look, surround yourself with loyal men, but not too loyal. Anyone who places your prosperity above their own cannot be trusted." Uh, and Quark's like, "Okay, I see. And also remember, when in doubt, be ruthless." Uh, Quark's like, "Yes, I see. I can do that. Go on." And then Zek just sort of slumps over. Uh,
No, he freezes and then just like
yeah, and uh, he dies. He just dies,
yeah,
falls over dead.
dead.
Um,
Yep.
and Quark's like, "I didn't do anything." Um, yeah, because a Zek's servant comes in and checks him with no response. And we immediately cut
Yeah.
to a portrait of Zek having died. And this is the first time we learn about uh, what they refer to as. Hold on, where is it? What's it specifically called? It's called vacuum desecrated. I believe it's called. Yeah,
Desiccated.
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 Yeah. So
Yeah.
in Ferengi culture, when you die, your body is vacuum desiccated, and the petri dishes of it, like little plastic holders of green ash,
Yeah.
are sold for profit to basically like that's basically your funeral. Is it's a sale of portions of your body, and of course the
Yeah, at
Grand
least if
Nagus.
you're a famous one. Yeah.
Well, no, I think for anybody because there was a point in time when just Quark was going to die, where he thought he was going to die in a later episode, and he does it. Now,
Yeah,
admittedly,
but remember he
yeah,
was
most people
Grand
probably can't.
Nagus.
Yeah, most people probably can't sell um, their stuff. Like
Yeah.
like most people don't probably care. But if you're, I mean, like I think everyone does it. It's sort of like cremation, but if you're
Hmm.
famous enough, you can sell it.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, if anyone's curious, desiccation means the removal of water or drying. Basically, when you have dehydrated foods, you're actually desiccating them. Yeah, yeah,
oh, so you can have like
desiccation.
a little. You can have a little bit of like Nagus jerky.
A little bit of Nagus jerky, along with your desiccated grapes.
Yes, but a single petri dish of this is being sold for 20 bars of gold pressed latinum, which, if you recall, like a massive plot of land was sold for 5.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
pretty it's pretty you know
And
clearly
that's for
Nagus is
one piece. God.
yeah, and I think they have like I think you can have like up to 40 pieces or something. I think if I
Uh,
recall, 40 pieces was how many uh they mentioned at a different
mhm.
point in the series, but. So they make a point that like one guy's like, look, 20 bars for this? I don't know. I have to think about it. And Cracks is like, in a year it'll be worth twice as much. And he's like, all right, I'll take it. Which,
Yeah, it's
admittedly, it's not. Yeah, it's not like you can ever have more. It's a very limited market. It's like an art piece, right? When an artist
yeah,
dies and they can't make any more art, the value of that art goes up because there can't be any more of it. Like
yeah,
that's it. And so yeah, let's see. So they're selling this. Quark is like, look, he goes to Rom's like, you're the only one I can trust. You're my close associate. I need you to be like my bodyguard and the person who's protecting me. Rom's like, look, but since you're so busy, I thought I would take over the bar. And Quark just sort of like laughs at him. He's like, you run my bar? No way.
no
Rom
way.
runs out after this, which this is going to play a role into what goes on later. But then Odo comes in. He's like, look, no one here is exactly overcome with grief. It's like this is a private funeral service. What are you doing? It's like, well, I'm here to inspect the Nagus because we believe foul play might have happened. And they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
good luck. And this is where they explain the vacuum desiccation. You're not going to be able to
Yep.
examine the bodies because it's already been, it's already being sold. And Odo's just like, oh, how touching. Like, okay, this is clearly an element of your culture, which is just kind of crazy. But Bashir gets mentioned, so you have Bashir mentioned. He doesn't actually appear in this episode, but he's mentioned.
He was too
And
expensive.
let's see. Oh yeah, they claim that the death was caused by a chronic condition, an infection of the thympatic membrane. Which, okay, sure, he just randomly dies because of that. I guess it's possible. He was old, right? It's literally he just
Yeah.
dies. I don't know what to say. Now the timing is probably what's most suspicious.
Yeah.
Oh, you give up the position of Nagus and then immediately die. What's that about?
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see. Yeah, Odo has his criticism of the whole process. And then we pan over to Jake and Nog. They're again looking over the promenade. Looks like they're friends again, and they're like, "Let's see." Um, hold on. The transcript seems a little bit odd. Oh, they're trying to have a conversation, and they basically just interrupting each other. And they're like, or Jake's like, "I guess humans and Ferengis don't really have a lot to talk about." And Nog's just like, "Yeah, that's what my dad says." Like, but that doesn't make sense. We used to have so much to talk about. Um, let's see. And both of them are talking about how their parents won't be really happy that they're hanging out. Uh,
Hmm.
and then Jake's like, "Come on, I have a great idea." And Nog's like, "What is it?" And he's like, "Jake's like, come on." And then they leave. Uh, I mean, we can probably let's see. No, I don't want to skip right to the end of that because that would basically lead us to the end of the B plot, which I don't want to do
Yeah.
just yet. But we get another. We get back to the let's see, Ferengi scene where we have Odo basically saying like, what does it mean? Basically, just a more like lore dumping. Odo's asking what it means to be Grand Nagus, and Quark seems to just be taking like a lot of pride in it. He's being very smug. It means from now on, you need to, if you wish to speak to me, you have to schedule an appointment. Odo's like, that's ridiculous. Also, it's
Hmm.
customary to show respect by kissing my scepter and like holding the scepter
Mm,
up. Odo is just like
mm.
rolls his eyes and walks away. And something I like is Quark's like, I suppose you can make an exception in your case. Again, Quark likes Odo. Like, he views him as a friend. I'm 100% convinced of it. Because, like, he's like, look, I don't care that you disrespect me. You can have a conversation with me, even if you're not going to kiss my scepter. Like, he could
You
basically be
don't
like,
kiss my head.
yeah, kiss my little head staff.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but let's see. Oh, Quark sees a coin on the ground and he, like, smiles and goes to pick it up. And just as he does it, a missile flies over his head and explodes against the wall. Uh,
Yep.
let's see. Uh, turns out that this was what was known as a, what are they called? Hold on. It's like a self-guided missile. Oh, they're
Locator
the
bomb.
yeah, locator bomb. It's this they're a type of Ferengi explosive. They lock on to a target's pheromones and they track them with very deadly and very accurate. If Quark hadn't lowered his head at the last second, he would have been dead.
Yeah.
So, uh, let's see. Uh, Yeah, they make a point that, like, all right, so Quark's a little bit shaken up, but he's worried that, let's see if we can get the locator bomb on the picture. It's only there for like a second. I really can't get on the image without playing it, and I don't want to risk that. But yeah,
Yep.
so like Quark is basically just like, oh, it's actually funny. So no, actually, yeah. So Quark is basically like he's super worried that he's going to be assassinated. He wants to request like Odo and Cisco protect him, and they're like, "Look, you know, we can't just protect you here. Like, you know, we work for the Federation. We're not your personal bodyguards. Like, we'll do what we can to
Hmm.
figure out what's going on, but you know, we can't just like bodyguard you forever." Um, let's see. Da-da-da. Okay, so I'm trying to see like what they say to him. Oh yeah, they're trying to figure out like who would want to kill you, and Quark's just like, yeah, everyone has a reason to kill me right now. And they're
Yep.
like, look,
You're gonna die.
you need to give us like more details. Quark's like, look, you know, I don't need to accept like if you can't protect me, you know, I don't need your help. Uh, Odo or Quark does briefly mention that someone threatened him, but the thing that's very much noted by Odo is that the attendant Mahardun was not attending Zek's funeral, which, considering how loyal that his like kind are like known to be, they're like that's a little odd that he didn't attend the funeral. So Odo starts investigating the attendant.
Yeah. Before we go on, Mayhardoon. That's his name.
Mayhardun.
Mayhardoon.
Mayhardun. Yeah, it's a weird name, Lauren. I'm gonna mispronounce it.
Yeah, it has an I there, and you think like, oh, how do I pronounce it? It's like you just say
Well,
like
it
May.
also has an apostrophe.
Well, no, that's basically just saying like, hey, make a break right here, and how you say it. So basically, you just treat that like a syllable. So may hard do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have we have another scene with Jake and Cisco, where
Mhm.
Cisco comments that Jake was out pretty late last night. He says you came in after midnight. Jake's being very dodgy. He's not responding to what he was doing. Cisco kind of
Mhm.
concludes you were hanging out with Nog, and he's like, "Yeah, we weren't doing anything wrong." It's like, then why can't you tell me about it? And Jake's like, "Look, it's private. I can't talk to you." Um, but Cisco basically sets his foot down and says, "Like, look, you know, I want you home for dinner tonight. Don't be out too late." And Jake's like, "Yep, sure, I understand." So
Understood, Dad.
another small scene, very well acted, very like building up like what's going on there. And then we have what I call the Godfather scene.
Yeah, the Godfather scene. It
I
is
mean,
basically Godfather.
they even have like the window with the little the I don't know what you call like those bars with the slits that kind of go before window to sort of give some shade. Um,
Um.
it doesn't really
Oh
matter, but
fuck.
they even have that behind them. And you have like the character Neva, one of the other Ferengi, saying like, "Look, you know, I've kind of grown tired of gouge mining. I wish to look for profits elsewhere." And Quark's like, "Oh, why should I give this to you?" He's like, "I want to introduce Synthahol to the Gamma Quadrant." Quark's like, "Ooh, a
Mhm.
lucrative business opportunity, but why should I give it to you? You didn't stand for me when I was announced." He's like, "Look, no, I didn't. And yet you come to me offering support." He's like, "I'll give you 50-50." And then Quark immediately is like, "Well, in that case, let's hope the Gamma Quadrant develops a taste for Synthahol." Offers him the scepter, and Neva kisses the scepter and leaves. Um, one thing I find a little bit like it's not bad, but it's very much just like telling the audience how we should feel about a certain situation. Cracks comments that it was a smart deal, and that Quark seems to have a knack for this, and that by doing all these deals, you're going to become very popular, and people are going to love you. And like they kind of just present that like Quark is doing like a phenomenally good job, which that's fine. But I'm not gonna
Mhm.
lie, he didn't really do a lot of great negotiation in that scene we saw. Maybe there was negotiation beforehand. We only get like enter halfway through the scene, but like it very much just seems like Neva just kind of gave him 50-50, you know?
Yeah, but he also has to do nothing to get it from
No.
there.
I get
Uh,
that, but like what I mean more is in the sense of like it'd be more interesting if you showed like Quark haggling, like, hey, I'll give
mhm,
you 30% of the profits, and Quark is like, no, instead I want 20% of the profits in a 15% interest or something like that, right? Where he negotiates some sort of different deal that's more beneficial to him in the long
mhm,
run or something. Um, but like he doesn't really negotiate. The guy just offers him 50-50 and then Quark accepts immediately, which it's a good deal.
mhm.
I mean, that's ridiculously good, right?
Yeah.
But it just and then Crack's like, "Oh, you're doing such a great job." It's like, "Well, is he? I guess so. I mean, he was just sort of given this stuff for free." Um,
Mm, Eh.
Admittedly, this could just be Cracks trying to butter up Quark even more, because we know
Yeah.
Cracks has more plans for him. Uh,
Yeah,
let's
because
see.
it's
Yeah, because after this,
uh
Quark leaves the room, and we see that Krax and Rom are negotiating. They're like, "Look, uh, Rom even says we'll have to come up with a new plan, something more reliable than a locator bomb, something that can't
yep.
possibly fail to kill my brother." So Rom is trying to kill Quark.
Yep.
Anyone who wants, because we've mentioned it before. Rom hits a bit of a retcon later on in the series, where they completely change his
Mhm.
character. Let's never forget that his first response to not being given the bar was to kill his brother.
Well, this is actually a different like personality and such from what we saw earlier in the show. Like this is pretty much going forward the personality. So, in this episode he tries to kill him and then from there they're like, okay, that's from like he always wants to get the bar eventually. Like when
Yeah,
Quark like dies or anything else and like he's always just he at first he doesn't do anything to go beyond that. He's just like, oh, when my brother dies or moves on, I get it. But then his growth from here is, one, he doesn't kill his brother, but two, it's like, oh, he goes into a different field, right? From here is like the Quark person. I mean, the Rom personality we will always get. It will progress from here.
well, yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
think this is a natural progression. Like his brother basically, yeah, I mean, like, first off, I think it's a little bit dumb that Rom would want to kill his brother. Being the brother to the Grand Nagus probably has a lot of boons.
Yeah, but he's also an idiot.
Yeah, Rom. Yeah, that's kind of how we have to understand this. Is Rom is sort of acting very petty and spiteful here. He's thinking, if I
Hmm.
kill my brother, I get the bar. That's his
Yeah.
thought, right? When it's like, yeah, but your brother's the Grand Nagus. Your brother is president of your entire civilization. Like,
Yeah, but the thing
sure,
is, he would have
Quark
to
is
act
not
on his own to get it.
true, yeah, because Quark is not going to give him any handouts. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know, Rom. I feel like if you just took a different initiative here, you could probably benefit. And I mean, we actually get a line that confirms this at the end of the episode. We'll talk about it more then. But I think Rom is acting very short-sighted here, sort of the deal.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Which
I
I
can
mean, I don't know.
agree.
Maybe there's just circumstances where, like, historically being the sibling to the the Grand Nagus isn't really as beneficial as we think it is. I feel like it should be
Hmm.
though. But
Yeah,
uh,
like in a society like the Ferengi, there has to be people who get by on social influence and such. Like and like basically just weaseling their way, like making these connections. Now, to be fair, Rom would die doing that. Rom is not smart enough for that.
no, he's
Rom's
not.
small brain.
Well, yeah, I mean, he has the weak lobes.
The weak lobes, yeah, the weak
Yeah,
lobes.
and he's
All the brain power is in the lobes. It's not in the head. Like the main goal is in the lobes. There's just tiny little
well,
brains
it's
in
like the
each lobe.
what's it called? It's like the Twi'leks from Star Wars. They have like a secondary brain located in their head tails.
Uh, I don't think it's the Twi'leks. I think you're thinking of whatever the fuck Ahsoka is, because Twi'leks
No.
are.
It's actually the Twi'leks. It's the ones with the long head tails. Cause
Oh, I could have sworn there was something about Togruta is where also their things are sensitive.
no. So with
Of like,
from what I recall, and it's been a long time since I think I remember reading this in the Star Wars tabletop game. The Togrutas, their little like headdress thing is like hollow, so but
mm,
it basically functions as like their ears. It allows them to basically echolocate, according to the tabletop game. I don't know about like actual canon anymore, but it basically is like it's like hollow and it absorbs sound and like registers it. But the Twi'leks are the ones that have like this weird hindbrain in their
mm-hmm.
like things, and I'm like, man, those things just dangle there, and like some of you like like some of the ones that like throw around lightsabers. I'm like, you're just gonna cut that off and like be lobotomized.
Yeah. Okay, so it's not that. Yeah, it's echo. It's used for space ultrasonically. Yeah. Okay, and
Yeah,
you are correct. It's like that thing would be gone. That thing would be gone in a. Yeah.
yeah. But with the Ferengi, it's just all stored in their ears. They have these giant like brains in their that like push into their ears with like a secondary brain in there that helps them look for good
Hmm.
business opportunities. But we get a scene where Cisco's sitting at the table, and it's funny because Dax just walks into the room, like she doesn't even really knock. She's just like, "Yeah, I'm here."
I'm
Um,
here now. Well,
she's like,
yeah, it's like, oh, they were maybe supposed to have dinner together, and the fact that they're close friends, it's like, yeah,
well, no, she wasn't.
yeah.
So she comes in asking if he wants to play Jakarian chess, but she sees that he's sitting down for dinner, and he comments, "I sat down half an hour ago. Jake was supposed to be home." Uh, and Dax again, being kind of Dax-like, she just sits down and starts eating, doesn't even ask. Which I mean, again, that's an element of the relationship, but it also feels like a very Dax move. Like ask
Oh yeah.
forgiveness instead of permission. She's like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna do this, and if people criticize me, whatever." Uh, but so
Mhm.
yeah, she comments, and Cisco's like, "Look, my son didn't show up for dinner. I'm getting kind of annoyed with this." He asks Dax about like, you've been a father before. Any advice on how saving my son's gonna take a miracle? So any advice? And Dax is like, "Look, I've been a mother 3 times and a father twice." Cisco's like, "Which is easier?" And she's like, "Actually, I never really had any success either way. Uh,
I suck.
so feel free to reject whatever I'm going to say. But if I were you, I would go find Jake and bring him here to eat his dinner." Cisco's like, "Yeah, you would." Dex like, "Absolutely." So Cisco, using the ship's computer, finds out where Jake is. He's in the cargo bay. Uh, Cisco like, thanks Dax. Dax continues to eat the stew, and Cisco leaves.
Hmm.
And this is the scene that I really like. I mean, this B plot has been building small scenes that individually I don't think are like phenomenal, but it leads to the scene where
Hmm.
Cisco's walking in the cargo bay. And I'm gonna try and get like the image of this because it's really nice. Um, and he hears some whispering, and he hears like Nog and Jake, and he's like, oh, he's almost like gonna sneak up on him and jump on him, like, you didn't attend. And he sees that Jake is tutoring Nog. So Nog is
Hmm.
trying to read, and Jake is like, praising him when he does well and like helping him along. And Cisco just
Yeah.
quietly like watches. He doesn't say anything. And like as he sees this, he just decides to back out and leave the room. And
Yep.
I mean, I really like this. I think it's a great scene for all 3 characters. You see Jake, who, despite like all the pressure from his father and Nog's family, societal pressure, and like he still wants to hang out with Nog. Nog wants to learn, but he's not allowed to attend school. So they hang out while doing school stuff, tutoring him and teaching him how to read. It
Hmm.
shows Jake is a compassionate person, but he's also kind of clever. He's a lot like his father. It shows that
Hmm.
Nog, despite being a Ferengi, is really values some of the lessons he gets, even if he's not very good at them. It shows that he's diligent and hardworking, and it shows that Cisco, he was mad at his son, but realizes his son had a good reason,
Yeah.
and instead of kind of a lesser series would have had Cisco come out and like praise his son immediately. Instead, Cisco never even mentions this. Like he
Yep.
sort of like lets his son have this. Later on in the episode, and we'll talk about it, but he does give his son a hug, like kind of acknowledging like I'm very proud of you, but he doesn't actually say anything explicit.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
he's just proud of his son, and he's like, look, he's gonna let his son do this because he realizes how important it is to both of them. And it's a very nice scene, and I think this is like accumulation of a lot of what the first season was doing with some of these scenes with Jake and Cisco, and the conflict between Cisco not really being super happy that his son's hanging out with Ferengi, as he sees that his son's a good influence on this Ferengi, but also it's like you know his son's a pretty good person, and I think he's very
Yeah.
proud of his son. It's very good. I really do like this scene. It I really do like the B plot. It's very short. It's very simple, but it gets the job done. Really sort of shows a lot of character work on all sides, and it's very subtle about it. You know, uh, some people who aren't really paying attention, they would easily look over the scene and not really realize like how Cisco really feels about it. But a lot goes through his face when he's watching his son do this. I want to see if I can try and get his expression. It's a very quiet, like almost expressionless face, but you can kind of tell because you know this character what he's thinking.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
uh, let's see. So Rom is basically helping Quark. Rom has told Quark that the Nagus had started some dealings in the Gamma Quadrant, and he hadn't finished them. Quark comments like, "I didn't even know he had gone to the Gamma Quadrant." Oh, it starts off with it looks like Rom is strangling Quark. He's like, "You're strangling me when you're trying to fix my robes." So it's a little funny there. Uh,
Hmm.
and they're leading Quark to a ship that's going to take him to the Gamma Quadrant to finish this lucrative opportunity. Let's see. Oh, meanwhile, we find Odo following uh, Mahardu. Pronounce it again for me, Pike, because I probably mispronounced it.
Mayhardu. Mayhardu.
Mahardoon. He's following him, and there's one scene that I think is a little bit dumb. Let's see if I can follow it or find it. So uh, they close one of the doors that's going to another ship, and Odo turns into ooze and slides through under the door. And I'm like, wait a minute,
Hmm.
that's supposed to be an airlock.
Wait a second.
I don't think you should be able
Wait
to
a se-
slip through there no matter what. But whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Krax joins Rom and Quark as they're going. Let's see. Does anything really like anything interesting said here? Um, he's just giving him like meaningless platitudes. Quark comments like, "Oh, a pretty woman at my side might make me appear more imposing or set a better first impression." And Crack's like, "No, no, no, you don't need to do that. You don't need a woman at your side when you're going here." And I don't know. I kind of like this because I think like the idea is if they brought a woman to his side, she would die in the plot that they plan on putting Quark through. And they don't want to do
Yeah,
that
or
because
she
that'd
would
be
be a
probably
witness.
yeah,
Yeah,
she'd be a
she's a
witness,
witness.
but also like well, so what they plan on doing is they plan on putting Quark in an airlock and opening it up into space.
Hmm.
So like if they could have put the woman in there as well, right? But I don't think they'd want to do that. One, it is a variable. You're correct that they probably don't want to account
Hmm.
for. But also, if like two people die, that would be a little bit more suspicious than just one Nagus dying.
Yeah.
Like if the Nagus dies, it's like, oh no, the Nagus has died. Quick, vivisect his body and sell it before anyone can examine what happened. It's like, huh, okay. I mean, I guess that's your culture, so we can't immediately think that's suspicious. But if the woman died, that would be more suspicious.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much. Eh,
yeah,
Then
and
Odo
so
would have good reason to get involved.
yeah, so they
And
put Quark in the airlock, and then like he realizes there's not a ship there, and he starts screaming out like, "You idiot! There's no ship here. What's going on?" And this is where they're like, "Sorry, Quark, but you've just been voted out of office." Quark starts
vote it
begging
out.
Rom, "Brother, please." It's like Rom's like, "So
Don't
we're
kill
gonna
me.
talk."
I'm just a little Ferengi.
I'm just a little
I've got
Ferengi.
four
Uh,
hit points.
Rom is like, "Look, we're gonna throw you out the airlock." Like they seem so super proud of this. Um, Let's see. Oh, Rom's like, Rom's. Nice name for a bard, don't you think? Let's see. And they're like, oh, do you want to do the honors? And suddenly Zek comes in. He's alive.
Yeah.
Uh,
Release him.
Release him. So Odo, Mehardu, and Zek are all there. Uh, and they're like, let's see. Quark, looks like you needed my help after all, says Odo. Odo, like, helps Quark out of the airlock and leaves. And Zach is like, look, you don't recognize your own father, Cracks? Cracks is like, you died. I saw it happen. Uh, he's like, yeah, I was in a Dolbargi sleeping trance. Mayhardoon taught it to me. And they're like, why? Apparently, this was all a test for Cracks. Zach was trying to see if he was ready to take his place, and he failed. Cracks is like, but father, I am ready. He saw for himself. I was about to grab power. And Zek says, you don't grab power, you accumulate it quietly without anyone noticing. With Quark busy in the Gamma Quadrant, you could have taken over the bar. You would have gained all the knowledge that passes through the Gamma Quadrant, and you could have used that power to rise in the ranks. You could have let Quark be a figurehead, and you could have had the real power. And Cracks failed. So
Yep.
Zek basically takes the position of Nagus back. Says like, I guess I have to be the Grand Nagus for a little bit longer. Uh, and that is the end of Quark's stint as Grand Nagus.
Didn't
Um,
die.
and
Woo!
yeah, this is the point I was trying to make earlier, where with like sort of stating that Rom is an idiot. He could have quietly gained power while Quark was the Grand Nagus instead of trying to grab the bar. But you
Yeah.
know, like ultimately, I mean, it's interesting. I like how the Nagus kind of views the nature of the power. He says, "Look, you need to slowly accumulate power. If you do it too quickly, if you do it too
People are gonna
not
smack you.
yeah, you're gonna gain this power, and it's what's gonna happen to you is the same thing that was gonna happen to Quark, is you're suddenly killed because you're this huge target, and if you
Yeah,
just
you don't
quietly
have the
accumulated
connection
it,
necessary to protect. Yeah.
yeah, you make yourself essential in a different way, without being so obvious about it. So yeah, Quark gives the staff back to him. Says like, let's see, I'm trying to see like if there's anything else here we didn't say. Zek does compliment like you've done a profitable job at this place. Maybe one day I'll come back and take it from you. Gives Quark a little bit of a laugh. Quark then corners Rom and says, "You tried to toss me out of an airlock." Rom begs for forgiveness, and Quark's like, "Forgive you? Why, brother, I don't think you had the lobes. Such wonderful treachery deserves a reward. I'm gonna make you assistant manager of policy and clientele here at Quark's." Rom's like, "What does that do?" Quark's like,
Uh.
"I don't know. I just made it up."
Yep. 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 Normal day with Quark.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Normal day.
again, this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where he was admonishing his brother because his brother wasn't acting enough like a Ferengi, and he views that as a moral good. So when his brother
Hmm.
does act like a Ferengi, even if it was to kill him, he's proud of his brother. I like that. Like, that's a very clear like indication of a character, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little silly, it's a little bit comical, but it works. I think in this setting, I think it works with Quark because that's kind of what he is. He's very over the top. He's very, you know, I'm lacking synonyms right now, but it's a very Quark like attitude. And then we get that
He's
scene I mentioned
very
before, where Jake and
merciless.
Nog, yeah, Jake is saying like, "Oh yeah, same time tomorrow, Nog," and they're like, "Yeah, as soon as you get out of school." Oh, they both check out a Vulcan woman as she walks by, in a tight
God,
cat
the
as the
Vulcan.
as the transcript says, in a tight cat suit. The boy's hormones kick in.
Oh, oh,
But
Vulcan women.
then Cisco comes back. Uh, Jake's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Cisco's like, "Look, I've been waiting for you." He hugs him and says, "You're a great boy. You know that. Now go be with your friend." So, I mean, I guess like a small little detail I would like is if Jake realized he had not attended dinner with his dad. Like,
Hmm.
Jake did technically screw up, even if he was doing a good thing in spite of that.
Hmm.
I guess I wish there was a little bit of acknowledgement there, but we're at the end of the episode. They probably have to wrap it up. They don't have enough time to delve too
Yeah.
deep. It's a B plot, but I thought it was a very good B plot. That's why I'm
Any
criticizing it,
more
is because
talking
it's
would
really
ruin
good.
the budget. Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought it was pretty good. And overall, I mean, this is probably my favorite episode of season one. I mean, again, when we review Duet, maybe my opinion will change, but I think this is an A episode. This is
Yeah.
very much an A episode. I
Yeah. Good
think
introduction to.
yeah, this is the
Um.
biggest. This is the biggest like lore dump of Ferengi culture we get. This is the first
Hmm.
Quark episode. You have a lot of characters, like a lot of character interactions. So, other than Jake, Cisco, Rom, Quark, you have Cisco, O'Brien. You have Odo, Cisco. You have Odo, Quark. You have you have O'Brien with Jake and Nog as the class. You have Dax in that funny scene with her and Cisco. You have a
Hmm.
lot of good character interactions that are just sort of like in the background. And like I was saying before, that's kind of what makes DS9 really good, is that no matter the episode, these interactions, these character moments really do elevate it. So when you have that in a bad episode like Move Along Home, the character
Hmm.
stuff saves some of that episode, right? It's a bad episode, but you got some good Odo
Hmm.
moments, you get some good Quark moments. It makes it salvageable. When you have those
Right.
same moments in a good episode, it elevates it extremely like high.
Yeah.
I mean, like there's a few episodes in TNG that I think are better than just this random episode from season 1 of DS9, but there's not a lot. This is a very good episode on every front.
Hmm.
And like this becomes much more akin to the norm for DS9. Like I know we've had a lot of criticisms in the past like 4 or 5 episodes, but this is looking at some of the episodes here, we still have a few that are a little bit odd. If I recall, we still have Storyteller, which is a bit weird. I'm trying to remember what Vortex was about. Oh, I remember Vortex.
Vortex.
Vortex is a good episode. Battle Lines is an interesting episode. I don't think it's bad. I think it's a bit like there's a few contrivances there, but I think it's a good episode. Storyteller,
I like it for Kira.
yeah, Storyteller, not great, but from there, we get a lot of really good episodes, and of course, like we're gonna get Duet, which that's pretty great. And
Yeah.
I mean, man, I think this is probably the best we see the Ferengi culture going forward. Like, we see a lot more of them, but I think this shows like, all right, the Ferengis are not just a joke, like one-off villain anymore. Like we got Quark as a character, right? Where okay, we have the Ferengi character, but now we have the actual culture with a lot more depth. It's not just
Hmm.
this one or two individuals on the station. It's no. There's actual some depth to it. We get the Nagus, who has a lot of interesting character interactions. We get how the different high-ranking Ferengi treat Quark. Some of them are more hostile. Some of them try and suck up to him. Some of them are a
Hmm.
little bit more cunning. Some of them are a little bit more dumb. You don't have this one. Like if you look at the first episode Ferengi were introduced in TNG or one of the first episodes, they're all portrayed as very stupid. Like, oh yeah, they didn't
Hmm.
actually have warp technology until they bought it off someone. So they're not portrayed very like intelligent. They have these cool electric whips, but they act very animalistic. Like they're hissing
Yeah.
and they're like prowling around and they're acting like animals on it, like
Yeah.
unironically. And like they're portrayed as very
Not a
stupid.
good look.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just I get what they were probably trying to do. They were trying to show how weird and different they were. Yeah, they don't act like humans do, right? Like in a conversation, they're like all hunched over and they're like shifting side to side and they're like doing these weird hisses and garbled noises. So if you're trying to show them different, that's fine. But the way they did it made them not a very good light. And this really shows it in a much
Yeah.
better light. It shows the different motivations. It shows the different ideologies. I mean, like I don't think you can argue like Zek is their leader, and I'm not saying it's like it's good to have this weird one leader that you just sort of appoint, but like he very clearly has like wisdom there. He's a wise
Hmm.
person. He's a cunning person. He fakes his death to try and see who his allies are and to test his son.
Yeah.
He names Quark the Nagus because he knows Quark won't actually be able to like maintain that power. Whereas like if he named like another high-ranking official the Grand Nagus, it might be harder to get that position back. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I do kind of wonder, like, how common is it to appoint like your son as like the next Nagus? Like, is the position really only given through nepotism?
No. So
Well, we know. Well, we know it's not right. But and what was it?
you probably cultivate a successor. You try to cultivate a successor that basically like in the case of Zach, he wants his. It's like the family business in a way. Of like, but
Yeah,
others might be like I like it's one of those things like you cultivate a successor. So one, nobody gets any ideas about killing you, but you also don't want them to be too cultivated and capable. So it's like they get an idea that they can kill you as well. And using a son generally is useful. Um, because it's like, oh, you have the family tie sort of deal, and the desire for approval from your dad. You know.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the best like yeah. I remember reading something about this. You'd probably better. Elected monarchies have historically been a thing, but they've never been successful because they almost always devolve into
Uh,
hereditary monarchies.
well, it's not that they're not successful because if we make like, oh, they change to something else or they devolve, it's like, oh, then like nothing is successful. Like they're successful, but the thing is like every government system is transitioning in some way. Like the institutions are always changing. Um, but um, the sort of like usually like yeah, power will be cultivated within like a few select families, and then the are again like there's various rounds of cultivation of where it devolves further and further to a smaller group until eventually one generally is the most powerful and takes power. Now, even like technically speaking, like what we call an elected monarchy, like isn't like, oh, this is how it all. It's usually more like, oh, we're selecting from within the house already, or and like it's more like basically we would need to go into every single occurrence, and so I could look at it and be like, yep, that's that way. So, for example, Tanistry succession, usually like in uh Irish, Scottish, those sorts of people, it's like, oh, you're usually selecting someone from within the family, and even that was a common thing in England, like, oh, like technically speaking, when an English king died for a long time, well, I should say Anglo-Saxon king, it's like, oh, the lords would, basically have to approve of the person who would be their successor normally to their land to also become the king, right? But
Hmm.
uh, this is a long rant about like the only things where I would say like, oh, this is electoral monarchy are like the king of Germany, who would thus be the Holy Roman Emperor, and the Polish crown after a certain point where like, oh yeah, we have like set rules and such, like, but and even that is like, oh, every election will have different rules, like it's
Yeah.
yeah, like technically speaking, succession in general, even where it's like, oh, it's supposed to go to the son, it's like, yeah, but are the other lords going to support this or not? It's like, no, okay, they elected somebody else, like someone else from the family, even though the rules, like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I, I mean, I wonder how many, because, I mean, so the way they make a point is that if Quark dies, Krax becomes the Nagus. They
yeah,
say
in
that.
theory,
So that
yeah,
means the position is hereditary if someone isn't appointed. Like, because, well, not hereditary. What I mean is, like, it's supposed to have gone to Krax other than Quark, but Quark was appointed. So if Quark dies, it apparently defaults to Krax.
Yeah, it would probably be assumed of like, oh yeah, Crocs is probably the best candidate to take it because he'll have access to it. Assuming he doesn't just rub his father's others, like his supporters, the wrong way. They would probably be like, yeah, we're fine with him taking the lead. But there's
Yeah.
always the question of like, okay, if Cracks, like, if Cracks is bad, they're ready to go to other people of like who have
Yeah.
economic legit. Like, it's very much a case of like it's hereditary until it's like, okay, there's weakness here, and like it's a capitalist system, like hyper capitalist. Like, if they smell blood in the water, they're gonna be like sharks and go for it.
Sure. I
And
mean,
yeah.
for all we know, like the Nagus doesn't really have any actual power, and it's all based on entirely reputation. So the idea is like, if you're
Hmm.
not a good businessman as the Nagus, people aren't going to respect your position, uh,
Uh.
and you're almost like I'm trying to think of like a real life position that's sort of in this, almost like a judge in a way, where like they have very little power, but the only power that exists is what we sort of interpret or believe to be in that position. And
Hmm.
the second we as a society stop giving value to that position, it stops having value to begin with. So you're right. If they appoint someone who they don't respect, the higher business people in the Ferengi Empire are just going to be like, well, we're just going to go do our own thing, or we're
Uh
like you
huh.
said, we're going to appoint our own Nagus. It'd be interesting if we learned some sort of historical point where there was like multiple Naguses, like when there was multiple popes, where it was just like,
Uh.
yep, we don't recognize your Nagus, so we installed our own.
Yeah. The Pope thing is weird because yeah, the Pope thing is fucking weird. It ended up eventually being there was three popes at the same time because the Avignons wanted like priests who were there, because at one point the Roman papacy like, okay, this is not tenable. We need to go to France, both because it's like, oh, that's the current pope's home nation, but also it's like, yeah, there's some bad stuff happening right now. But then it's like, okay, when they moved back, the Avignon people didn't want to go back to Rome, and that's how it happened. But then, like, they try to make a compromise candidate a couple popes later, and thus the third pope happened.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
yeah.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I only have like one thing to kind of point out because I mean, we've talked about this episode now for I think an hour and a half. I think we did a pretty good job talking about it and breaking it down. I don't know if you want to say anything else, but one thing I did want to point out is we get two rules of acquisition this episode. We get rule one: once you have their money, you never give it back. And rule six,
Mhm.
which Quark was going to comment, but Zek interrupts him, saying, "Never allow family to stay in the way of opportunity." So yeah, just
Yeah.
two new rules of acquisition that we got. Um, I
Hmm.
think the full list can be found on Memory Alpha, but we don't have a full list of Ferengi rules, unfortunately. One of the failings of the series
Uh,
is they don't give us the whole list.
well, you would have to work them into every situation. Memory Beta has
You
more of
couldn't.
them.
You could just like make up like an official book that has them, but
Uh, Partially done, but even that was sort of like a gag thing. It's sort of like it only comes up when you need to bring them up. and it's like, okay, what fits this situation and also fits being, a capitalist, like a hyper capitalist. Um,
Yeah. All right, and yeah, anything else you want to say about this episode, Pike?
no, I
Okay.
I know how you are. I know what you're gonna do. You're gonna cut me off. You already did it, didn't you?
No, I didn't actually cut you off this time.
Oh, mm, mm,
I was gonna comment because
mm.
we have the new cover image. It shows me and you sitting in chairs with our uniforms. You with your appropriate depiction as a fish. Um,
Why did you have to reveal my true appearance?
um,
God, I'm so.
they already knew that it was either that or you carried a spear.
Uh, I. Oh my God,
But
I'm gonna
anyway, so
kill you. I'm gonna.
so I'm sorry, but yeah. So what do you think of this? What do you think of this art? Like, give me compliments because I worked really hard on it.